There is an inscription written in the church notebook of the Normans, who lived in Ukraine centuries ago, and were heavily oppressed by the Russians. It was said, "My God, increase the power of the Ottomans so that they can come and save us. They may grant us freedom of religion, and ensure our safety of life and property, Amen." Of course, it would not be easy to rule dozens of different nations on 3 continents. But the Ottoman Empire had accomplished this for hundreds of years. The main reasons which allowed them to rule for centuries are: Number 1. They had not imposed their own language on people. Number 2. They respected different religions and beliefs. Number 3. And they considered everyone equally before justice, regardless of nationality or religion. We can see the level of justice in the Ottoman Empire with the case that came into the Ottoman court, where an individual cased against Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, and the judge ordered to cut off the hands of the Sultan. Today in this video, you'll get to know about the story of that case of Ottoman justice, where the court ordered to cut off Fatih Sultan Mehmed's hand. But before going further, it's our humble request to the viewers to subscribe to the channel, and do like and share the video. A few clicks of yours will not cost you anything, but it will motivate us, and help our channel to grow. We really appreciate and regard your support. And please, give your feedback in the comments section below. It was 1453, Constantinople fell, and Istanbul became the capital of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror immediately issued an edict, and addressed his soldiers and the Muslim people who settled there. He said, "You will not ask people questions like, 'What is your religion? Do you pray? Do you fast?' etc. Instead, you will ask people questions like, 'Are you hungry? What do you need? Do you have any problem?' Just consider that there are millions of people even today who cannot reach the mindset of this edict, which was published 600 years ago. It is actually a piece of evidence that beyond his age, what a genius and great Fatih Sultan Mehmed was. As a result of this tolerance, which defended the rights of all non-Muslim people, and did not separate them from Muslims, Christian artists, scientists, and most of the people continued to reside in Istanbul. One of them was Atik Sinan, who was an architect. According to Dmitry Kantemir, who lived in the 1700s, and wrote the book entitled The Rise and Fall of the Ottoman Empire, mentioned that the original name of Atik Sinan was Christodoulos, but few other sources also refers it as Christodoulos. He was one of the Greeks who lived in Constantinople, and did not leave this land after the Ottomans took it here. In the rebuilding of Istanbul, Atik Sinan became one of the chief architects of the palace. With the time and because of his talents, a friendship was formed between Fatih Sultan Mehmed and him. So much so that, when due to the lack of places of worship, the churches in Istanbul were turning into mosques one by one, at that time upon the request of Atik Sinan, Fatih Sultan Mehmed endowed the Church of St. Mary of the Mongols to his mother. Fatih Sultan Mehmed issued a special edict, and announced to everyone that this church will not turn into a mosque. Later this grant was confirmed by his son Sultan Bayezid II. It is one of the only remaining Byzantine churches of Istanbul that has never been converted to a mosque. These edicts of Mehmed II and Bayezid II are still exhibited inside the church, which showed the grant of the ownership of the church to the Greek community. Sultan Fatih Mehmed was a fan of Hagia Sophia. However, his intention was to build a mosque, more magnificent than this building, and worthy of his name. So he commissioned architect Atik Sinan for this. The construction of the Fatih Mosque was started in 1463, and hundreds of workers were employed to build it. Huge pillars were brought from Egypt, as the aim was to build a larger structure than Hagia Sophia. Finally, after 8 years, the mosque was completed in 1471, and at the end of the construction, an interesting event took place. Fatih Sultan Mehmed was quite surprised when he saw the mosque which he had built in his name, and he did not like it at all. Because the mosque was much smaller than he expected. And later, it also came to know that without asking him, architect Fatih Sinan cut those huge columns that Fatih Sultan Mehmed especially brought from Egypt for this mosque. Enraged by anger, the Sultan immediately summoned the architect to his presence, and the following conversation took place between them. "You didn't make my mosque as big as Hagia Sophia, and deliberately cut those columns and made my mosque small." On this accuse, architect Fatih Sinan said that, "My Sultan, Constantinople has mostly been hit by earthquakes, and I tried to make it more durable against any of the unfortunate disasters." Fatih Sultan Mehmed got even angrier at these words. He felt that his excuse was even greater than his fault. He ordered to cut off architect Fatih Sinan's hands, and both his hands were cut off immediately. Architect Fatih Sinan, who thought that his hands were cut off unjustly, sued the Sultan by following an interesting way. First, he went to the Galata judge and then to another judge of the city, but neither of them could afford to judge Fatih Sultan Mehmed. Then he knocked at the door of Hosea Bey, the judge of Üsküdar. Hosea Bey, who was appointed by the Sultan himself, and was symbolized as the Ottoman Justice, found the architect at right and filed a lawsuit against Fatih Sultan Mehmed. He asked the Sultan to come to the courtroom for this case. A description of an Ottoman explorer Evliya Çelebi about what happened in the courtroom is as follows. The judge Hosea Bey did not allow the Sultan to sit in the courtroom. He said that, "Right now you are not here as the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, but as an ordinary man who is in court because of his case of Injustice Act." The architect's eyes were opened in amazement, because he was not expecting that anyone can say this to the Sultan of the Empire. But Fatih Sultan Mehmed stood up normally, and the judge sat down. The architect and the Sultan confronted, and the trial began. After listening to both sides, the judge said that the Sultan made an arbitrary decision without obeying the Sharia, and that the architect had the right to retaliate according to Sharia's provisions. He ordered that the hands of Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, who conquered Istanbul, be cut off, just like architect Fatih Sinan. It has been written that architect Fatih Sinan was astonished after hearing this decision, but Fatih Sultan Mehmed remained silent and did not object on this. It was not known whether this provision will actually be implemented, but architect said that he did not accept this punishment, and gave up on his complaint. Upon this, Judge Hazerbi stated that Fatih Sinan is now not able to work in this situation, and decided that the Sultan would pay him 10 akçe every day as compensation until his death. By the way, akçe was the silver coin that was used as the chief monetary unit in the Ottoman Empire. Fatih Sultan Mehmed accepted that he was wrong, and he corrected the decision by offering 20 akçes daily instead of 10. He also gave a house to the Christian architect from his personal wealth, and thus the case was closed. The Christian architect was very impressed by the Islamic justice. He said that he hadn't seen a justice like this before in his life. He then converted to Islam, by declaring that "I am a Muslim from now on." Again, according to Evliya Çelebi, at the end of the court, Fatih Sultan Mehmed went to Judge Hosea Bey and said, "If you were afraid of your Sultan, and made an unjust decision, I would have cut your head with my sword." Judge Hosea Bey, on the other hand, showed the weapon he had hidden under the robe. He replied, "My Sultan, if you had been proud of your sultanate, and had not listened to the decision of the Sharia court, I would have crushed your head with this mace." It is not known how accurate these dialogues written by Evliya Çelebi, but there has been such a case written in Ottoman history, where Fatih Sultan Mehmed's hands were almost about to be cut off. However, it should be noted that the architect Atik Sinan was proven right later. Fatih Mosque, built by Atik Sinan, who argued that he shortened the columns due to the earthquakes, because such a large structure could not stand there, was completely destroyed in the 1766 earthquake. The Fatih Mosque, which we know standing today, was built between 1767 and 1771 by architect Mehmed Tahir Aga during the reign of Sultan Mustafa III.